Here's a simple idea to make a bowl using dried fruit and resin. Hey there, welcome to the Art Lab. My name is Andy, and today we're going to be making this bowl using a silicone mold I got from Temu, pretty cheap, some dried oranges, and some deep pour resin. This bowl was pretty cheap on Temu, I think maybe about $4 or $5. As you can see, the mold goes this way, and that's going to give us this small little decorative bowl. It's probably a bit too small for a fruit bowl, but perfect if you want it for some sort of other decoration. Now I've got these pieces of dried fruit, and you've got here shriveled fruit. It's all about the flavour. So these are actually used for making cocktails. In this case, we're going to be putting in resin. Now the hope here is that these are dehydrated enough that they don't have too much air. So my biggest fear is getting air bubbles in this tray. By using a deep pour resin, this is going to take probably about 3 days to cure, and what that slow cure time means is it gives it time for the air to escape out and come out the top here. That will mean that any sort of imperfections may be down on the bottom when this is placed down, but it is a little bit hit and miss unless you've got a vacuum chamber which you can then go and put this in, which sort of compresses all the air, and any big bubbles will get compressed because it's a compression chamber, and to a size that you can't actually see them. Now I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to have to let the resin do it for me. Since this mold has been sitting in my dusty workshop, I've just given it a spray with some isopropyl alcohol and just using a paper towel to ensure all the dust is off so that we get a nice clean mold. Now as you can see, that mold's nice and shiny, and that's going to give us the shine on our finished piece. So if the mold is dull, then you're not going to get that shine. So it's really important to make sure you clean your mold. So even though this was packaged up, it could have got some dust when it was made in China, so it's always good to just give it a good wipe down and spray with isopropyl alcohol. There's a 99% one, and that will make sure we get a nice end result. Since we're working with resin, don't forget your protective gear. So I've got some gloves here to put on, got goggles, so even though I wear glasses, these goggles are going to still help protect just in case there's any sort of splashes. You don't want to get resin in your eyes. And of course I've got a respirator, so there's a 3-in-1. It's probably coming up soon for me to change the filters, so I need to probably buy some more of those. I've been doing quite a lot of woodworking with this, and so you get the discoloration from the dust. This obviously helps not just with resin but also with dust if you're doing woodworking. Now one of the things I need to do is to understand how much resin I'm going to need, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. One, you can fill it with water and then pour the water into a cup, preferably one with some measuring, but if you don't have a measuring one, you can sort of use the cup or the same cup is what you'll be mixing resin in, and sort of see the volume there. This case I might do water because it might be a bit easier, but if you've got a sort of a wider mold, then rice works as a good way to be able to just gauge that volume. Welcome to my art sink. As you can see, lots of previous painting and artwork done here, and this is where I'm just going to try to get a bit of a rough idea on how much liquid we need in the mold. So I've got the mold here, just put a little bit more water into it, something's escaped out. Alright, so that's filled up there. Now this is not going to be exact, I'm going to lose some in the process, but it kind of gives you a good idea on what the volume of water is that's needed. Resin that's needed. Okay, so what we can see there, if I had a measuring cup, we'll be able to see exactly how much resin. Considering we lost some, I'd say it'd be the full cup that we're going to work on, and so I'm going to be able to base my calculations just using this as a measure. Okay, so water and resin don't go that well together, so once you have done that measurement, you can just wipe off any water that might be left. The resin I'm using is by volume mixture. This is where it'd be handy to have a measuring cup, but I don't seem to have one on hand. I must have used them all up. So what I'll be doing is just marking out on my paper cups, and because we know that it's the full volume of this resin here, I'm going to probably make 2 batches up, because if it's at the top here, it's pretty hard to stir. So we'll do 2 batches. It's got a really long cure time, like it's 3 days, so I've got quite a bit of time to work with this resin, and so I'm just going to go and mix those up. You don't need to see that process. If you want to know how to mix resin properly, I think it's FAQ, so beginner FAQ videos on my channel here. Of course, the only downside with putting a mask on is I can't then do the voiceover while I'm working with the resin, because otherwise I sound like this. And this is not the best audio when you're trying to explain things, so I'll be doing voiceovers from now on. So what I want to do here is use some of this orange alcohol ink, and that's going to tint the resin. So it's going to be still transparent, but just with a little orange tint. And it's going to do a couple of things. One, I think it'll look pretty cool, because you can have slight orange colour to the resin with the dried fruit, dried oranges around. And the other thing is that sometimes clear resin is susceptible if, say, the bowl's up in the kitchen and there's lots of UV light, it can start going yellow, and so this will just help give it some protection from getting that yellow look. Since I've got 2 batches of resin, I'm going to try to do a bit of a gradient, and so what I might do here is do more drops in one mixture than the other, and that will give us one lighter and one a little bit darker. So you can see the 2 different shades here. We've got 2 drops of alcohol in this one, and then 3 in this one. And as I said, we're going to do a gradient. So actually it's going to be the other way around, because here's the top of the bowl, which is down at the bottom here. And so we want to put the lighter stuff in first, because that's going to be at the top of the bowl, and then we'll go to the darker stuff and also put in the fruit. There's a little bit of a lip here on the mold, and that should hopefully hold those oranges in place. So first up, in with the resin. And now it's time to add the dehydrated oranges. Onto the darker colour to hopefully start giving us that gradient. So what I'm doing now is putting these oranges just in a very thin layer of resin. I haven't filled this mould right to the top. I've filled it so the resin is just over the bottom piece here, and this way it's going to allow me to put these orange peels in, and once it's cured, be able to put a layer which then goes over the top of them. If you filled it all the way to the top, the oranges will just float to the surface. Okay, so it's 24 hours afterwards. We've got our fruit here. Some of it's going to try to race to the top with paint. I'd hope some of it will be stuck down. I can sort of see through here, so I think this will look quite cool when it's done. What I want to do now though is, see there's a top there, so I want to fill the rest with resin right to the top, and that will then allow all those bottom pieces of orange to be covered properly, and it'll give us a nice bottom, flat bottom on this. So that's what we're going to do. It's the next day and it's time for the demolding process. This is always the bit that I really enjoy, because this is when you kind of get a surprise. It's kind of like unwrapping your presents at Christmas. What's it going to be? What's it going to look like? What's that end result? Here we have a bowl, a bit of trimming up to do down the bottom. Do have some air bubbles in there, and some of these here obviously up right to the top, but that's quite a cool little bowl. So here's the bowl. I think it looks great, fits in with the decor. Maybe you can put, you know, little things inside it. It's up to you. Could be jewelry. Might be a bit too small as a fruit bowl, but yeah, no, that looks pretty good.